Hello, you're listening to the Saluki Gamescast. My name is Justin Young. Joining me, as always, are Alicia Utecht and Mario Sanders. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing okay. First day of the semester. And, yeah.
OJ could not be here today. There was a last-minute illness, so we wish the best for OJ. But this is the second part of our Game of the Year podcast. So in the first part, if you haven't heard it, go back and listen to it now. We do actually our category awards and everything. So like, I don't know, most disappointing game.
Most aesthetically pleasing.
Badass game of the year, those sorts of categories and everything. So you can go back and you can listen to that. Today's podcast is all about getting our collective top 10. So there will be actually top 10 or top 3 or top 5 lists, or top 40 maybe in Mario's case.
Not that many this year. Top 27.
But you can find those on our website at salukigames.com. Those will be going up over, I'm not 100% sure, depending on when this podcast goes up and everything. But
They'll
those will
be out there for public consumption.
Yeah, the same week that this podcast goes up, those will be going up. And so we have people from this podcast, but also friends of the podcast and everything that are doing lists. And so that'll be fun and cool to read and getting different opinions and views on all the games and everything. But for today, we are ranking our podcast's top 10 games of the year. We have a list of games here that is 20 maybe or so
20-ish.
games. And we are going to narrow that down to 10 and then rank those, 1 being best, 10 being worst. These are all games that came out in 2023. So that's our one rule. It has to be a 2023 release. Just for this, our list online will include potentially some games that came out in other years that we just got around to playing this year. But for now, we're just doing 2023 releases. And I guess we'll just jump on into it. We do have some feedback and input from OJ, so OJ's views will be represented as part of this and everything since they could not be here. All right. So let's go ahead. Let's start off. I'll just list the games that are on here. Again, we're going to pare this list down, but these are games that have been suggested by people on this podcast. So no particular order: Diablo 4, Alan Wake 2, Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, Baldur's Gate 3, Sea of Stars, Final Fantasy 16, Super Mario Brothers Wonder, Street Fighter 6, Hitman Freelancer, Hi-Fi Rush, Dave the Diver, Mortal Kombat 1, Dredge, Lies of P, Pikmin 4, Jusant, Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon, which, we did not have a award for, but might win the award for Title of the Year, as Alicia pointed out the other day. Thirsty Suitors, Shadow Gambit, The Cursed Crew, Final Fantasy VII, Ever Crisis, Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, and Super Mario RPG.
So I guess as a last second, sorry, I didn't realize this until right now. Would we want to put RE4 Remake on here?
Yeah.
I didn't play it, and I don't know if other people played it. And so, that's sort of the only reason why I could see maybe not.
I didn't play it.
I didn't play it.
Maybe we can leave it off then.
Okay.
Shout out RE4, not on our list.
I mean,
good game. You probably should play it.
Yeah, I mean, that original is a Stone Cold classic. That's a fantastic game, and I've heard nothing but praise for this new one, but it's a game that none of us apparently touched.
Yeah.
And it was one of those games where, because it's a remake, I was like, I can always play that later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's other new releases I need to play for the podcast.
And those the Resident Evil remakes get put on sale pretty regularly. That's not a game that will stick at $60 or $70, I imagine, for very long.
It's not a Nintendo release. They're not going to be charging $60 7 years from now for it. But yeah, I mean, obviously, if you've never played Resident Evil 4, pick up that remake. You owe it to yourself to play Resident Evil 4 at least once. because that game was incredibly influential at the time. It really changed action games at the time. All right. So, I think the first thing we should do is try to pare down this list a little bit by cutting some games.
I will say I love that Ever Crisis made it on here, but I think that is an easy cut. It's definitely not Game of the Year material. And again, the potential is there. If they would just move it to the Switch instead of being a mobile game and kill all the gotchas. But as it stands right now, not Game of the Year.
All right. I thought you might actually make somewhat of an argument for that. So.
No, when Rebirth comes out, I'll be arguing for that next year. But
yeah,
I feel like regardless of how good the other versions are, the Switch version of Mortal Kombat 1 kind of invalidates it to be a top 10 game.
Yeah, and I don't see 2 fighting games getting on here, and I will argue more for Street Fighter 6 than I will for Mortal Kombat 1.
I feel like I've heard more people talk about
I'll say even
Street Fighter 6.
Even beyond dissing on the Switch version, I think Street Fighter 6 just got more positive reactions in general.
Yeah. I like Jusant quite a bit, but I don't think it probably makes this list given all the heavy hitters that are on here.
What is Shadow Gambit: The Cursed Crew?
All right. So this I actually didn't include any of the category awards, and I really should have, probably for the best style category. So this is a turn-based strategy game. So think sort of like XCOM.
Okay.
And it's from the developers. I can't think of their name right now, but they did an Old West one previous to this, Desperados, I think was the title. And I think that's the one that they did. But it is pirates, but it is Pirates of the Caribbean style pirates. Okay. So it is like there are like ghosts and skeletons and that sort of thing. And it's got that sort of like visual style to it. But like the thing that really makes that game kind of stand out. So like it's very good. So there's a lot of like kind of stealth moving around and everything. Like you have to get people into position. You have to sort of sneak them past enemies that have like vision cones and everything where they can see. But like each little level that you go into is this very like detailed, handcrafted little play set that you just want to play in. Like it's like both of you are quite a bit younger. OJ would understand what I was talking about. But like in the 80s when they would advertise toys like G.I. Joe or something, they would always have in these commercials like these elaborate play areas that these kids were playing in.
Oh yeah.
That were like nothing that actually existed in reality. Right? So like they would be like in some big dirt area that had like a waterfall coming through it and everything that they could drive the boats over, and there would be a jet flying under. And you'd be like, oh man, like where is that exist? And you're like, it doesn't exist anywhere. They built that on a set. But that's how every level in this game looks and plays. Like somebody has gone in and finally handcrafted every element of the environment and made this just like this really cool world that you just want to keep playing just to see more of the world and everything.
Okay.
And then your different characters have different abilities, and those abilities interact with one another and everything. It's just a really good one of those games. And the developer, I feel bad, I can't think of their name right now. But after they made this game, they actually shut down. I think we may have talked about it on here, but they like closed down immediately after shipping this game, which was really a shame because they were making these really cool games, but they were just like, hey, this, the stress of being an independent publisher is just like a little too much on us.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it sounds great. I hadn't even heard of it. It's certainly one that I will look into.
It sounds like one that I should look up a walkthrough. Because is that on PC or?
Yeah, it's on PC, but it may be on other platforms as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so
for those just listening, Justin is showing us a video of that. Does look super fun.
Yeah, so I mean, just imagine Pirates of the Caribbean. Like, they very clearly watched Pirates of the Caribbean and were like, let's make a video game of this without the license. It's not licensed. It's not from Disney. But it is, I always think back to that first Pirates film particularly. They just nailed that vibe so well.
Yeah.
And this game is really playing off of that quite a bit.
Yeah, so I assume like all those different like environments or different levels or different maps that you are sort of navigating as you're fighting whatever sort of enemy it is. It looks incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
As you said, it's got a great style to it.
I have not made out my top 10 fully, but it will be on my top 10 of the year.
Cool.
That wasn't necessarily a proposal of cutting it. It was just like, this is not a game that I've heard of.
Sure. No, I completely understand.
One that I might propose, though, and I will leave this more up to you, Justin, because I think you're probably the only one that played both, is do you see both Dredge and Dave the Diver making a top 10?
If we had somebody else on here who was passionate about them, maybe.
Oh,
but no. I completely understand why you're asking about it. Yeah, I mean, I don't think they both end up making this list. And in fact, if I'm being honest, I'm not sure if either of them ends up making the list. I would probably lean a little more towards Dave the Diver right now.
That's the one that you talked about. At least I heard you talk about more. You seemed a little bit more interested and passionate about. And so that was is this an okay time to potentially cut Dredge and we can come back to Dave the Diver?
Yeah, I'm okay with cutting Dredge.
I think another one that we can probably cut. I know OJ played Diablo 4. I don't remember. Did either of you play it?
I did a little.
Very little.
Yeah, just from like remembering what they talked about and looking at their list here, like it, they mentioned like it is another Diablo game, and like there's nothing wrong with that, but the fact that we have so many incredible games, the fact that it is just another Diablo game, it doesn't do anything out of left field or crazy wacky. Oh my gosh, this is brand new, amazing.
Yeah, and that's kind of a wild idea to me that we're cutting Diablo 4 because it's actually a really good game. Yeah. But like I agree with you, right? Like it doesn't. It's hard to look at these other games and say it places ahead of most of these games.
That's the thing is, looking at this list, I'm like, holy moly, there's going to be
it was a good year of games.
Great games that get cut.
Fantastic year of games.
Yeah, I think probably Diablo 4 can get cut because I think it's not going to compete with some of these others.
Yeah.
The one that I was looking at that it's one that I of these games probably spent more time with than others was Hi-Fi Rush, and I know we talked about it earlier this year of like I love that game, but I don't know if it makes a top 10 list. I don't want to cut it yet, but looking at some of these other games, it's pretty difficult to really believe what, like recognizing like, holy moly, some of these are going to get cut.
Right. I know.
Yeah, I mean, Hi-Fi Rush is one of those games that it's just a fantastic game, and it was a fantastic game that came out left field. Like nobody was expecting that game, Of course, they announced it and dropped it the same day. But it did come out like this time, so we're recording this in January.
Yeah.
It came out this time last year, so it kind of has 11 months of additional games coming out and stealing its thunder.
Yeah, I think it is by far probably the oldest game on this list.
Oh yeah, I don't think anything came out prior to it.
Yeah,
aside from remakes, of course.
Well, yeah, the one that came out the earliest in 2023. I'm just thinking like in terms of what games we've talked about a lot.
Right.
Did either of you play Alan Wake 2?
Not yet. I have every intention to, but
Yeah.
I have not played it yet.
No, I haven't either. I thought OJ had, but OJ didn't make any strong arguments about it. So
I'm not seeing it on what they've listed. So,
yeah, I mean, I think it's fine if we want to cut that, since none of us have played it. Again, I thought OJ might make an argument for that, but again,
Mr. Chance. Mr. Chance, OJ. Shouldn't have gotten sick.
Yeah.
yeah, and I think
How selfish of me.
I think the fact that it's not on this list that he sent in already, that to me would make it, while I'm sure, again, it's a phenomenal game and maybe we all play it and we're like, holy, well, we missed all, we probably should have had that included. But I mean, I think the fact that, we hadn't played it, I think it's a fair.
I think OJ maybe added that to the Game of the Year list originally. I can't remember if they added that or I did. But regardless, right? Like
I don't remember any of us talking about it beyond just like, hey, it's coming out soon. Oh yeah, remember that game's happening because there's so many other great games.
Mm-hmm.
That game's apparently phenomenal, so I would like to play some of it. I'm looking at Hitman Freelancer. That is not a full new game. It is DLC for a full game that is actually 3 full games that have been combined into one package. And, I really like that. I really like that package quite a bit, but it's really, I think in fairness, it's really more sort of like an expanded DLC.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think there could be an argument for a DLC on here.
But we have so many other great games.
Yeah, I mean, I guess here's what I would say. People listening, if you have not played Hitman World of Assassination, go buy that package now. There's so much content, and this adds so much. You can literally get hundreds of hours of play out of that package. And it's just really fantastic. I think it's entirely worth your time, the commitment of time and everything, and the commitment of money. And I don't say that about many games where I'm like, I'm confident this is worth the money. I can't say it's everyone's cup of tea, but it is fantastic. So I am fine with cutting Hitman Freelancer.
Okay. So that brings us down to 15 that we have right now.
Good. I'm glad you're keeping count. All right, we have to cut 5 more of these. It gets tough now, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think you said you had only played a little bit of it, and while it does have an incredible name, is Armored Core high enough on your list, or do you feel strongly enough about it to include it in a top 10?
It is a game that, I haven't played a huge ton of. I did really like what I did play of it. I don't feel like can probably be passionate enough about it at this point. It may end up making my top 10, but I'm fine with cutting it at this point.
Okay.
And I'll go ahead and throw Thirsty Suitors on that pile of dead games, I guess. I think that's an important game in its approach and like what it's doing, and like the fact that it's really trying to bring a more diverse audience into games and showing the representation of that more diverse audience.
Yeah.
And I love that the game is as crazy as it is, right? Like as weird as it is. Like it's the sort of game that a lot of mainstream video games, we've talked about this before, they're not weird anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's a game that's really weird. And I love it for that. Okay, we'll include skateboarding segments in here. And you're like, why? Like, why is this in here? And I love that it goes for that, and it feels like a real passion project in that way. But, again, that's a game that I might include on a top 10, but I don't think it'll make the top 10 here.
Mm-hmm. 3 more.
All right, 3 more to cut.
How are we feeling on revisiting?
On revisiting what?
On revisiting Dave the Diver.
I guess maybe one question to ask is, if you had to pick 3 games that you said this is definitely what I would want to see in the top 10, that are maybe not like the obvious ones of like a Tears of the Kingdom, I feel like that's probably going to make it. A Baldur's Gate is probably going to make it. What are maybe some of the like fringe ones that you're like, I definitely want to see this make it in? That doesn't mean it's going to make it in, but
right.
You know.
I mean, if I was picking 3, it would be Zelda, Baldur's Gate, and Mario Wonder. And I would say those 3 need to be in a top 10. If I was going to pick 3 more beyond that, it would be Sea of Stars, Shadow Gambit. Then it gets rough after that.
Mm-hmm. I think, I certainly think those, and this is just because I have more familiarity with those first 4. I would agree with those first 4 for sure, of Tears of the Kingdom, Baldur's Gate, Sea of Stars, and Wonder. I mean, just thinking about how much OJ really enjoyed Tears of the Kingdom, Sea of Stars, and Wonder, and I'm, messaging with them right now. Yeah. And they're saying they would probably put Baldur's Gate 3rd below Tears of the Kingdom and Sea of Stars. So I think that those 4, and if you feel strongly about Shadow Gambit, I won't fight you on it. What about you, Alicia? I'm going to assume Kirby is.
Yeah, I'll say I think for me probably it would be Kirby, Lies of P. I want to say Pikmin 4, but I don't know if...
Pikmin 4 would be in that second 3 of mine.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It would be in that top 6. I was thinking about that. Like, I kind of hate to take it over a more indie game like Dave the Diver, but like it's actually a really good game. All right. So that was weird. So there is a little pause there. We don't know if listeners could hear the alarm going off, but there was actually a fire alarm going off. We weren't sure what it was when it actually started going off. So you probably heard some confusion. I think Mario said something about, what is that?
And I probably said, did you hear that?
Yeah, so we don't know if that came through into the microphones, if that will get picked up and everything. But we had a fire alarm. We had to leave the building. It is very cold outside. You have to go stand outside. But everything seems to be okay now. It seems like it was probably a false alarm because we got back in fairly quick and everything. But just to give people listening an idea of what just happened and why we abruptly have switched what we were talking about and everything, that's the reason why. So I do think maybe we were talking about Pikmin 4.
That sounds right.
Because I guess I had asked what 3 people would most want in. You had mentioned Tears of the Kingdom, Baldur's Gate 3, Sea of Stars,
right,
Wonder, and Shadow Gambit. And Alicia, you had said Kirby, Lies of P, and you were leaning on Pikmin.
Yeah, I think Kirby and Lies of P are like my top 2, and then if there's room for me to have a third, Pikmin 4, but I also think I'm okay if I don't have a third.
Okay. And then Justin, I know what you were talking about was
that was in kind of like your top 6.
Yeah, you were sort of on the border of including it or something more indie.
Yeah, I mean, I think Pikmin 4 is a fantastic game, and I think, that's 3 Nintendo games in my top 6.
Yeah,
and so I think that's where I'm kind of a little conflicted over it because, but this was a fantastic year for Nintendo.
Yeah. Absolutely. May I, and we haven't even talked about SMRPG as sort of their big remake of the year.
Yeah.
But may I suggest as a potential cut, Street Fighter 6. it's sort of not in your top 3. Sounds like, Justin, it might not be in your top 6, or if it is, it's sort of on the border.
It will be low in my top 10. I think it'll probably end up making just barely making the cut, maybe.
Yeah.
Because I'm just not a big fighting game fan.
Sure.
Yeah.
I do think this is a fantastic fighting game, just because of the full package of it. I know I've talked about that on here before.
Yeah, I'm not a big fighting game person either, but I know I had friends who really enjoyed it, and I think what they said that I think you kind of reiterated as well over the course of the year was how accessible and like new fighting game friendly it is. Like, you don't have to be like a seasoned vet in fighting games to get an enjoyment out of this.
It is the best they have done with that accessibility since the original, like, Street Fighter 2.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, that was a game that I remember playing in the arcade when it first came out. Actually, it was, what was it? Super X Drugs, I think was the name of the drugstore. There was one of those attached to Kroger, and in between the two of them, they had like 4 arcade games they would rotate in and out. And I think that might have been the first place I ever played Street Fighter 2. And I remember at the time just being like, what is this thing? Of course, like, people don't realize now, like, Street Fighter 1 was not a very popular game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't a big game when it came out. Like, most people don't remember that game in arcades. And so when Street Fighter 2 came out, it was like, oh, what is this? This looks unlike anything else that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, then, of course, it just blew up and became the thing that everyone was into. So it is the best that at least that franchise has ever been at, you know, making it accessible to, say, casual players or new players. And, you know, and for me, not a huge fighting game fan, that makes it like a fantastic game.
Sure.
Yeah.
But, like, you know, this is our collective top 10. So if it's barely making my top 10, it's probably not making our collective top 10.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, we have to cut 2. We're down to 12 now.
Okay.
I guess for me, I would really like to see Super Mario RPG make it into the top 10, even if it sits at number 10. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I can understand, you know, based on the conversation we had last time regarding, you know, when we talked about best remake and how much new stuff is it doing and all that. I can understand if that's one that we end up leaving off, but
that's Mario, what are your top 3 that you're like, I really super want to see these?
I think that's the thing is I really didn't play that many new games in 2023, so I'm looking at this list and I don't have like a super strong affinity for any of them. I played Wonder over the break, and I think it's a me problem. I'm just not into 2D Marios. I don't think it's a bad game by any means. I can certainly understand why people love it, and I think what they do with the Wonder Seeds is really cool. It's just, like I said, it's just not a game for me, but that's not to say, you know, to cut it or anything like that.
You weren't big on Super Mario World either.
I wasn't. Yeah, like I said, that I don't know what it is, but the 2D...
For shame.
The 2D Marios are just... I don't dislike them. I prefer the 3D Marios instead, and maybe that's probably just growing up playing 64 and Sunshine, you know, first.
Sunshine. It's a broken game.
It's still fun. And I'd say, and I think beyond that, the other 2 that I really spent time with are Hi-Fi Rush and Lies of P. And I think both of those are really cool. I would probably lean Hi-Fi Rush over Lies of P. And I think that's also just because I think that's a game that clicks with me more than Lies of P does. I think I want to, I guess I would put it this way. I want to see Lies of P in the top 10, but I would have Hi-Fi Rush higher than it, in my opinion.
No, I will say my affinity for Lies of P is entirely story based.
Sure.
Like, I know the gameplay was very familiar, you know, very Souls-like.
Yeah.
And all that. So, like, My affinity for it is entirely story based. I understand if it doesn't make top 10.
All right.
And then the other one that I played some was Final Fantasy 16, which I think is a lot of fun. It's another one I would like to see in the top 10, but it's another one that I could understand potentially getting cut. And I've only given like an hour to Baldur's Gate just this last week.
I do think 16 is one that OJ would argue for. Be top 10.
So that's what I'm looking at.
Yeah,
so OJ has Mario RPG ahead of Final Fantasy 16.
Yeah, he's got RPG as his
like fourth,
third of like the new games that came out this year.
Oh yeah. So,
but in texting them, they did say they would have Baldur's Gate probably ahead of it.
So I'm just thinking, Mario, if you and OJ both take Mario RPG over Final Fantasy 16.
Yes.
That's what you just said?
Yeah.
So I played a little of Final Fantasy 16, and I liked what I played. I mean, I did say the story was kind of a little... I just probably haven't played enough Final Fantasy lately.
Oh, that's right. You did you played it during the demo when it was available.
Yeah.
That's right.
So I did play a little bit. I think it's, I think it was really what I played was interesting. It's a game I want to go back and play more of, but it's just a big time commitment. But I'm thinking, if the two of you are taking Mario RPG, do we put that ahead of Final Fantasy 16? Do we cut Final Fantasy 16?
So what I'm hearing right now is it sounds like you said we have 12 games?
We have 12 right now.
From what I'm hearing, it sounds like we need to cut 2 of the following 3. Final Fantasy 16, Dave the Diver, or Pikmin 4. I think the other 9 feel like people have some pretty strong feelings about.
I would take Pikmin 4 over Dave the Diver.
Okay.
Like Dave the Diver is a really neat game. Pikmin 4 is it is a franchise that is 4 games in, and this is this is the first time that they feel like it feels like they've gotten it right. Like this is what Pikmin, if this had been Pikmin 1, Pikmin would have been a much larger franchise, it feels like. And I don't blame them for that, right? Like Nintendo's cool about giving people time to figure it out and everything. But I feel like going here for Pikmin potentially, and the sales of this one would seem to indicate it, potentially becomes like a much bigger franchise for Nintendo
moving forward.
Yeah. Like I would say a Pikmin 5, I have much higher expectations for like sales wise and everything. Because I think the people who picked this up and played it are like, oh, this is how I always wanted this game to be.
Yeah.
And it was always like a pretty neat little franchise, but it obviously had some problems gameplay and interface wise and everything. So I would take it over Dave the Diver.
Okay. Being the only person to play both of them, I would default to you in that sense if you're okay cutting Dave the Diver then.
Yeah. I mean, we need to cut 2, and I think it's one.
God, it sounds like Final Fantasy 16 is the other one to cut.
I mean,
that just feels wrong to me, but again, there's just so many great games. Like
I mean, I feel like there's more passion about Liza P.
Yeah.
I think that's
and
fair.
maybe if OJ was in the room, it would be different. But again, like you said, OJ had a lower score for 16 than for like Super Mario RPG Remake.
Yeah, so for those listening, as we said, we have OJ's top 10 for the year here printed out. So we are going off of this. Obviously, if OJ were here, they could make these arguments maybe a little more compelling themselves, and maybe they would change this. But on their list, they have Mario RPG ahead of Final Fantasy 16, and Mario also likes that better. So if we have to cut something,
I think we have to cut Final Fantasy 16.
Well, let me ask you, Mario, would you take Hi-Fi Rush over Final Fantasy 16?
Personally, yes.
Okay. I would as well.
Okay.
Then there we go.
Yeah, and I think that, is maybe more based off of vibes than, but I think, that matters.
Well, yeah.
Vibes are important sometimes. Okay, so Final Fantasy 16 off the list. That gives us our top 10 games in no particular order at the moment.
Yep.
So now it's just figuring out the order that these games are going to take. Yeah, and you think the hard part's done, and then the real hard part begins.
I will say, and I guess I'll say, and even this is considering OJ's list, I would be okay putting SMRPG at number 10. As a remake that doesn't, OJ said doesn't do a ton of things, especially new. I think what they did with it is great. I love that they finally had the chance to actually do it. Mm-hmm. I think that, we talked about last time as well, like that took work from probably mostly Nintendo, I imagine, working with Square. And so I'm so glad that they had to do it. But that is like my one hesitation of even picking it above Final Fantasy 16 is as a remake. I think I don't place as much value on it, but I will go back to play Super Mario RPG Remake before I will go back to play Final Fantasy 16.
And those are two games in the same genre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah. But I guess I would say I would be okay putting SMRPG for that reason as a remake towards the bottom of this top 10.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's amazing about that is, and I think can't be undersold. So like when people say you're putting a remake in the top 10, is that it is a remake that, well, first off, like we didn't know we'd ever get Super Mario RPG in any form or fashion ever again, right? Because here it is a combination between Nintendo and Square development.
You got 30 years later, probably close to it.
Right.
Yeah.
And like this has not come out on
It's never been re-released.
right, it's not on Nintendo Switch Online. Like you can't play it that way.
Yeah, it might have been on like the eShop on like the Wii or something like that,
Yeah.
but I can't even say that with a ton of confidence.
Is it on the Super Nintendo Classic? I don't think it is.
I can't say yes
Yeah.
with much confidence there either.
Well, and regardless, right? Like the idea that we would get a full ground up remake of this game, and it's not an up-res like some of the remakes we get. Like they actually went in and rebuilt this game from the ground up. There's not new content per se, but there are new mechanics added into it.
There are some additional post-game boss fights.
Okay, there
but
are.
I think that's, in terms of new content, I think that's about it.
But like not a whole new area.
There's not a new area. There's not like
a
additional story.
Okay.
Beyond, like I said, a couple of these boss fights that are tied into
Right.
the game, but that's about it.
I think that's a compelling argument to make our top 10, but I think your argument that it's 10th place makes a whole lot of sense.
Okay.
We also are not set on these, so after we number these, we can always like move them around.
So then I'm wondering if Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe should be number 9. Because that one is also technically a remake. Well, it did add new content, and again, it's not just a res up, it is remade entirely and adds new content, but...
And that's mostly the reason why I was willing to concede SMRPG below it, is because, again, based on that conversation we had last time of it adding new content.
With Magolor's epilogue.
I don't honestly even remember what won our best remake category if we gave it to... I believe those were our top 2. I don't remember if we
The Making of
gave it to-
Karateka one.
Oh, that's
it's
right.
Best
I
retro
completely-
bone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We're spoiling
And I
it.
think
If you haven't listened to the other
Sorry.
podcast, that's why we said listen to it first.
I think we did give the retro bone to SMRPG because of the unlikelihood of it ever happening.
Okay.
But I think, yeah, in terms of top 10 in general, the fact that Return to Dreamland Deluxe did new stuff alongside remaking the previous game.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think that's certainly reasonable to place Kirby above Super Mario RPG Remake, but I don't know if I would. I don't know if I would put it that much higher than a ton of other things that are doing things that are completely brand new.
Yeah, I'm good with Kirby being number 9.
And again, we can always move these around if we need to later. All right. So, I think we are kind of going these in reverse order because I'm going to talk about Shadow Gambit. I think Shadow Gambit's a really good game. It's also a game that I'm the only one who played or had any experience with. I also think, I don't know how fair this is, but it is a very particular genre. And if you like that genre, you're going to love this game, I think. But if you hate that genre, it's not going to sell it. Where some of these are more, more mainstream. I can see more people getting into and everything.
Sure.
So I could see that coming in 8th for us.
Okay. Sounds good.
It makes it pretty easy if we just go down the list. All right, it gets a little bit more difficult now.
I think
it seems like maybe our next 2 in some order are probably Hi-Fi Rush and Pikmin 4.
Oh, interesting. I was thinking Lies of P.
I
think those are the next 3.
Yes, I would agree. I think that those are the next 3. I didn't include Lies of P because I know how strongly you feel about it, even if it is strictly narrative based. So I would agree that those are the next 3. But
you did play Lies of P.
I did play some Lies of P.
So you tell us, how do you feel about Lies of P?
So I think Lies of P is a really cool game. Again, I just think it's probably, I'm just not that hardcore of a gamer in terms of that Souls-like combat. And so for me, I would probably put Hi-Fi Rush above Lies of P as well, but I don't know if that's based off of. Well, I think that's it. I don't need to justify it. I think beyond that, I would probably, in my list, I would go back to play more Hi-Fi Rush before Lies of P.
Well, I think there's we talked earlier about kind of the accessibility. I think a game like Hi-Fi Rush is more accessible than the gameplay of Lies of P. There's a reason I haven't bought it and played it and have just watched videos of other people playing it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the biggest Souls fan. I did really get into Elden Ring, but that was more kind of the open world, kind of exploration elements of it that really kind of mixed up how that genre works and everything. This seems more of a traditional one of those Souls likes.
Yeah, it does do some things that are different that I think are really cool. So you basically have a detachable arm that you can put different sort of builds. So you can have different builds for your character. The same way you can build up different stats in really any of the Souls-like games. But I think what's cool is those different sort of arms have different abilities. And so they can change even the way that you would go about combat. So I do think that it does set itself aside in that way. It isn't just a complete Souls-like clone. And I know that's not what anybody's saying here, but I do want to, recognize that it is adding something in and of itself as well.
But you would take Hi-Fi Rush over Lies of P.
I would go back and play more Hi-Fi Rush before Lies of P.
Okay. So we have Hi-Fi Rush, Lies of P, Pikmin 4. Those are our next 3. I think the other 4 that are left there, we all kind of agree are probably our top 4 of the year.
Tears of the Kingdom, Baldur's Gate, Sea of Stars, and Wonder.
Right.
Yeah.
In some order, not necessarily that order.
Yeah.
I would agree those are probably in the top 4 in some order.
Okay, so
So I will say I've been going on and on about the story of Lies of P. I don't know how much story Hi-Fi Rush or Pikmin 4 have.
Hi-Fi Rush definitely has a story.
Okay.
It's definitely goofy. It's silly. I'd say that game is more of a comedy, if you had to put it in like a genre.
We stand
At
goofy and
least
silly.
from what I played, it probably has its serious moments as well, but it takes it in a lighthearted way. I feel like.
Yeah, I think it starts out very like I would say Saturday morning cartoon more than anime.
Yes. Yeah.
But there are some kind of dark moments in it that kind of like surprise you. But like, yeah, you don't come to that game for the story. You come to that game for the style and for the gameplay.
No, of course. I'm just thinking in terms of like weighing fairly.
Sure.
Because like you don't want to weigh the storyline of Lies of P against like Guitar Hero,
Well, I mean,
so
it wins in that fight.
It does, but it's not a fair fight because Guitar Hero's not interested in any story.
I don't know. Some of those.
The Guitar Hero 3 has a little bit of a story.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I think some of those games ended up with some manner of story. Like, you're a band on the road. You're going to hit the big time.
Yeah. So I just want to make sure I'm approaching them all with a fair shake at everything.
Well, how about this? Again, we did not do this on purpose, and we actually did not order these like on purpose. But like, it sort of feels like it's Hi-Fi Rush, Lies of P, and then Pikmin 4
as 5, 6, 7.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I haven't played Pikmin 4, so I don't know if you feel more strongly about it. I mean, like I'm certainly, don't want you to feel like you have to concede.
Well, I mean, look, it's our collective top 10.
Yeah.
Hi-Fi Rush will probably not be in my top 5, but it will probably be in my top 10.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, like I would probably take Pikmin over Hi-Fi Rush because I think I just liked playing Pikmin more. But I also really like Hi-Fi Rush, so I'm fine with it going ahead of Pikmin.
Why don't we go? I will take the opposite approach then. I will say, let's go. What are we on?
We're on
number 7, Lies of P. Number 6, Hi-Fi Rush. Number 5, Pikmin.
Yeah, I guess that's the question, because Justin, you're the only one of us who's played Pikmin. So, like, where do you see Pikmin in
like
those 3?
I haven't played in your top 5. I think that's.
I haven't played Lies of P, so I can't say in comparison to it. But I would take Pikmin over Hi-Fi Rush.
Okay, so I'm hearing.
Then yeah, I think let's go 7. I would say let's go 7 Lies of P, 6 Hi-Fi Rush, 5 Pikmin 4.
I'm okay with that.
Sorry, we're not making sound because we're all
we're making note
writing down stuff right at the moment, which actually turns out to be really difficult while you're trying to talk and everything.
Okay, so that leaves us for our top 4 in no particular order listed right now: Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom, Baldur's Gate 3, Sea of Stars, and Super Mario Bros. Wonder.
Yeah, like in May, I would have told you Legend of Zelda, hands down, easy, game of the year. Mm-hmm. Like, even with Starfield still to come out, I was like, what can Starfield be that will be better than what this game is?
Yeah.
And, and I really did not think any game could top it for me. And I'm still a little bit conflicted. I think so. A few years ago, about 6-7 years ago, when the Switch came out, and Breath of the Wild came out alongside it, and Mario Sunshine, or not Sunshine, Mario,
Super Mario Odyssey.
Odyssey, yeah, came out. I actually chose Mario Odyssey over Breath of the Wild, and I thought Breath of the Wild was really good, but I thought there were unpolished elements about it, right? Like, and so Tears of the Kingdom takes all those elements, and like I know OJ talked about the weapon system, right? So like one of the frustrations of the of Breath of the Wild is that the weapons break and degrade, and that feels less frustrating in Tears of the Kingdom because you can combine these weapons and everything. So you can, put a boulder onto your arrow and everything and make these into new weapons and, construct your own weapons and stuff. And so it fixes like one of those biggest problems. And then it adds all sorts of new navigation abilities. So like the fact that you can, the ascend ability, so you can go up through the roofs of caves and temples and everything. And then, the God Hand ability, Ultra Hand, sorry. The Ultra Hand ability that allows you to like build things, so you can build rafts and mechs and all this sort of stuff. It is Breath of the Wild extremely more polished. So, like you took a fantastic game, a top 10 game, a game that was already number one for a lot of people, and for some people, like their favorite Zelda game ever, or the best, maybe even their favorite game ever. And you made it, I think, in almost every way better.
Yeah.
And so like that's a strong resume to bring into the end of the year. I think Baldur's Gate 3 for me.
Sorry, that's what I was like, okay, so what is the game that has Justin as a little wonder? Is it Baldi's Gate?
Yeah, I think for me, Baldur's Gate 3 is just the game, we talked about under best surprise and everything. And here's this game that sort of comes out of nowhere for a lot of people. And I'd played at least one of the original Baldur's Gates. I think I played the original one. I don't think I ever played two. And it was fine as a computer role-playing game and everything. But like I maybe wasn't fanatically, in love with it the way some people are. It is a game that just won over the world.
Yeah.
Like in a bizarre, in a way that kind of shocked me, like to the point where people I'm friends with who aren't really super into video games are going, hey, are you playing Baldur's Gate 3?
Yeah.
It's the game that when I walk up and down the hallways here on campus, I hear students talking about it. Like, oh, I'm playing Baldur's Gate 3. And, oh, have you done this? And I don't hear that for a lot of other games. And I think it makes a strong argument for it being game of the year. And beyond just being a great game, right? And a much more polished game than, those sort of Western RPGs, right? So like Starfield is in that vein of Western RPGs. And this is so much more polished than one of those games, those Bethesda RPGs, which I always have trouble getting into. Like, Skyrim and all those. I always play for a little while and kind of fall off of them, which I said about Starfield at the time. Like, I never expected to love that game. And this game actually like kind of caught on to me. I was like, oh, I really enjoyed this.
Yeah.
This is really a lot of fun. And I think part of what makes it so much fun, and one of the things that I think maybe isn't clear when you first start playing the game is, okay, yes, there are different options. You can choose different, choices you can make that are going to affect the game. But what they really do well here is recapture that feeling of playing a Dungeons and Dragons game with your friends.
Yeah. Which
is something I've done, but like not a lot of. Like I'm not somebody who did that every Friday night or something. But even maybe going a step further than that, we were talking earlier about Shadow Gambit and like the sort of play set mentality and everything. And like when you're playing with your friends as kids and you're playing with your toys and your friend is like, I I want to be able to do this with Donatello, the Ninja Turtle, right? Like, I want him to be able to do this. And you're like, well, we're playing so you can have him do that. And
he can fly. Why not?
Right. And, or, you know, like, well, Donatello is going to throw his bow and stick it in the gears, and that's going to make the machine halt. So it gives you extra time to rescue this person. And you're like, okay, well, when you're a kid, like, yeah, you just say that and it happens. When you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, you can just say that, right? And maybe you have to roll for it, but like, you can just make that happen.
There's a creativity and imagination that's there.
Right. And Baldur's Gate 3 does a fantastic job of capturing that, in that they allow that sort of weird sort of problem solving to take place in it. And the Bethesda games, to me, always promise that and then under-deliver on it. And I'm not going to say you can do anything in the game. You can't. But it comes the closest to capturing that feeling of, hey, we're just going to... we're playing this pen and paper RPG game, or even if you're just like kind of spitballing a story with friends, right? Like, you're doing that sort of thing of you tell a sentence and then you pick up from there and tell the next sentence of the story and everything. This does the best job of capturing that feeling of, we're going on an adventure, we're telling a story, and we can kind of tackle it in the way that we want, and we can kind of build these relationships in the way that we want. And so for that reason, I would put Baldur's Gate 3 ahead of Zelda. And then, you know, for me, I would probably put Sea of Stars third and Mario Wonder fourth.
I would say, looking at OJ's list, they have Wonder below both Sea of Stars and Tears of the Kingdom. And then they said,
it sounds like their
Gate.
top three would go Tears of the Kingdom, Sea of Stars, Baldur's Gate 3.
So
from what they've played thus far.
I think it seems...
No, they haven't played a ton of Baldur's Gate yet. So,
sure.
That's a feeling that, can go either way, right?
But I think it seems like a consensus among us that Wonder would be 4.
I think that's fair. Like I said, I am not going to fight for Wonder. I think it's a good game. I think it belongs in the top 10. It's not going to be any higher than this for me. So that's one where I'm happy to defer to wherever Justin and OJ would find it to be most appropriate.
Okay.
So if OJ has Zelda first and Baldur's Gate third, right? They have Zelda first, Sea of Stars second, and Baldur's Gate third. So it seems like the one that we most agree on is Zelda. Mm-hmm. So do we want to have Zelda 1, Baldur's Gate 2, and Sea of Stars third?
I would be okay with that.
I would also be okay with that. It's one of those things, I've only played a little bit of Baldur's Gate. I have the other two. I just haven't had a chance to play them. Mm-hmm. And these are 3 games that I'd be willing to bet would just be my top 3. Like, even having not played the other 2, I'd be like, when I do get around to them, they will probably be my 3 favorites of the year.
Well, I think they all scratch a specific itch.
Sure.
Justin just talked a lot about Tears of the Kingdom and Baldur's Gate 3. I think Sea of Stars really scratches that nostalgia itch for the old 1632-bit games.
And I will say, Baldur's Gate 3 brought back some maybe not so great memories of playing like XCOM, where the very first attack I did, 95% miss. I'm like, yeah, God bless video games.
And I think, we shouldn't undersell Sea of Stars. Like, when we talk about it being nostalgic, it is very good at capturing the way those old, 16-bit RPGs looked. Though, again, as we noted,
it's a love letter.
It looks like a 32-bit game, not really a 16-bit, but like that style. But it is a very good game. It's not just riding on the coattails of those old games. It's
of course not.
Completely nostalgia-based. It is a very good game if you want to play a role-playing game in that style of that old style of game. Yeah. And so, Yeah, I mean, like I said, I would put Baldur's Gate probably ahead of Zelda, but I am fine with Zelda because that seems the more like.
Well, I think
greater consensus. If you were to average out sort of my 1, my 2, my 3 versus everybody else's.
We're going to assign points and everything.
Yeah. I don't know. I think Sea of Stars number 3 sounds good to me. I don't, having played neither Tears of the Kingdom nor Baldur's Gate, I think there is something to the fact that, like you said, Justin, there's so many people who don't typically play video games or don't know if they're getting it, if they're typical video gamers, but just like walking down the hall, you hear people talk about it. I think that there's something to that almost makes me want to put Baldur's Gate 3 ahead of Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, I mean, I've only played Baldur's Gate 3, and I know it's one that I'm surprised how much I enjoyed it right off the bat. You know, I enjoy doing like tabletop RPGs, but I'm not like let's do this. I'm not one that's always trying to do it. Like I am the friend that's like following. Yeah, sure, I'll play. And was not in many ways not surprised how good it was because just of everything that we've heard about it. But in many ways, I was like, wow, like this is a game that I want to. I went to bed for the night and like immediately want to get back to when I have the next chance. So I will say I really have no issues with either of the two, but yeah, I think there's something about Baldur's Gate 3, and maybe it's just, and this is really unfair. Zelda is Zelda, that's not, and even though this is doing things that Zelda has never done before.
What?
I expect Zelda to be good. Even for me, the worst Zelda is probably still going to be pretty good. CDI not included in that statement.
Well, excuse me, princess.
I don't know. Spirit Tracks.
Yeah, but I don't know. I look at both games and I'm like, Tears of the Kingdom feels incredible and amazing and overwhelming. Baldur's Gate feels like it could be overwhelming, but then the fact I look at my friends who don't typically play games and they're like on top of it, all into it, and I'm like, okay, this feels less overwhelming.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, yeah, and that's kind of a weird thing too, because Zelda games have never really been overwhelming, right? Like, I mean, maybe they are to some people, but like, I mean, they're very accessible. Like, no,
it's very much for me. It's very much Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom feel overwhelming. Not Zelda as a whole feels overwhelming.
I could see that. I mean, I think they're deceptive in that way because I think like all Zelda games, once you start in, you realize that they're not super difficult games. Mm-hmm. Like I wouldn't call either of those super difficult games. They can be challenging, but they're not, they're not like a Liza P. Like, sure, they're not that Souls style game. But I do think you raise a really good point in that there are people who aren't playing Zelda who are picking up Baldur's Gate 3. And like, it's sometimes people who surprise me, like who are like, yeah, I'm really playing this, this new game. Have you heard of it? Baldur's Gate 3? And I'm like, that's the game you picked up? That's the game you chose to try? Like, no, play Pikmin 4. Like, Pikmin 4 is a much more accessible, easy game for somebody to pick up and play. Sure. And, there's something to that it has captured the imagination of quite a few people. It is probably not a weird coincidence that game came out relatively close to the Barbie movie. Mm-hmm. And you have like this cultural moment where the Barbie movie blows up and everybody is kind of enthralled with that movie, whether they went to see it or not. They're like talking about it. Mm-hmm. And I feel like Baldur's Gate 3 comes out, like a month or two within that time of when Barbie premieres. And it kind of has the same effect. Everyone's playing it, or if they're not playing it, they're talking about it.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the other thing to say is Baldur's Gate came out, July originally, at least on PC. And it was like, I think, September, maybe on PS5 and Xbox. Well, no, maybe it was PS5 in September, and then Xbox was just this last month, right?
Maybe it was August, because I think it was a month between them coming out.
Okay. I think the fact that
like July, August, or August, September, I forget.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, again, Tears of the Kingdom came out in May.
Yeah.
I think the fact that like I still see people playing a lot of Baldur's Gate, you know, as much it's still talking about Baldur's Gate, still like enamored with Baldur's Gate, and Tears of the Kingdom had its moment, and it was a very long moment, but I think people have like been able to put that game down, and it's like, this was a great experience. I've loved this game. But I feel like the conversation that is going to happen around Baldur's Gate, like I don't see that ending like anytime soon, to be honest.
Right.
Like that's a game that like
I think once Wonder was announced, people kind of settled on Tears of the Kingdom.
If anything,
I don't know if Baldur's Gate's going to settle.
I feel like Baldur's Gate is only hitting its peak right now. You know, winning Game of the Year, it's going to bring more people in. You're going to have people continuing to talk about it. Like, I don't know what the next big game to come out, I don't know when Rebirth comes out, but like
February.
Okay, so it's like, this is a game.
You knew she would know.
Yeah,
it's the end of February, actually. So there's still another month and a half.
But that to me is like, this game is only hitting its peak now, and it's going to continue to get more, like in some ways, I could see it getting more and more popular over the next couple of months as more people continue to play it.
I'll say even when Rebirth comes out, it's PS5 exclusive. Baldur's Gate being accessible on different systems
is it a timed exclusive? I thought it was original. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, different conversation.
I guess that I think for me that is a reason to put Baldur's Gate above Tears of the Kingdom.
Well, I think the point you're raising is, you know, Baldur's Gate feels like it is like The Witcher 3, a game that, you know, The Witcher 3 has sold something like 20 million copies or something, and it's like way more than you think that game should have sold. Like, it's a very good game.
And probably 3 times the sales of 1 and 2.
Oh, yeah, not more. Yeah, dwarf those games, because those games were fairly niche. But, you know, and part of that's the television show, right? Like, that brought in a huge new number of fans to try that game out. But it is one of those games that just continues to sell for years. Or Skyrim is another example. And it's weird. It's these role-playing games. It's these very Western computer-style role-playing games that just hook people over a number of years. And we keep seeing this happen again and again. And, like, every time we're like, this is so shocking. We can't believe this is happening. And, like, obviously there is a market for these games, and a much bigger market than there used to be for computer role-playing games.
Well, and I think the big thing about it, and I mean, this is, I think, quite literally the definition of a role-playing game, is like, as I was going through and making my character in Baldur's Gate, I'm like, oh, but I really want to do this, and but I would really want to do that. So I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to just have to like play the game again, you know,
right
after, so that I can get that, you know, different experience. And I think that's why those games are so, people identify and connect with them so deeply, is because of that like emergent, you know, personal story, you know, within like a lot of game studies, they talk about the 2 stories of, you know, video games, you know, the one being like the plot of the game, but the second being the story of one's gameplay experience.
Right.
And I think every game has the story of one's gameplay experience. And I think that's what makes that second story so, you know, exciting to hear people talk about. But Baldur's Gate offers up so many iterations of that second story that I think is why it's, I think, going to continue on as like a legacy game that 10 years from now, people are still talking about Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, it's really kind of weird when you look at Baldur's Gate 3 compared to other role-playing games that came out this year, right? So we have Sea of Stars on here, but what we don't have on this top 10 are Final Fantasy 16 and Starfield. And those were supposed to be the biggest role-playing games of the year.
Yeah.
Now we have this little like sequel that's been in early access for years for Baldur's Gate 3, and this little indie developed Sea of Stars game, and those are the role-playing games that made our top 10.
Yeah.
And SMRPG, but that's probably maybe more nostalgia fueled than even Sea of Stars is.
Right. Yeah. I mean, well, that may say a lot about the 4 people on this podcast.
Also true.
The like 5 Nintendo games that made this list says a lot. Like, okay, yes, we have a bias towards Nintendo. Like, get over it. Like, we admit it. Like, we're not lying to you. This is our top 10. We're not making a top 10 for anyone else.
No, but I think it's sounding like number 2 is Tears of the Kingdom. Number 1 is Baldur's Gate 3 for us.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Like I said, that is probably how my top 10 will pan out. And so
I have no issue with that as well.
All right. So looking at this top 10 list and everything, are there any like moves you want to see made? Anything you want to see moved up or moved down?
I think it all looks good to me.
It looks like a good list to me as well.
Okay. So we'll read through this for our listening audience. Your top 10 games of the year. At number 10 is Super Mario RPG, the remake. At number 9 is Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, also a remake. We were very kind to remakes this year, but we got really good remakes, right?
Yeah.
So, number 8 is Shadow Gambit: The Cursed Crew. That's a one that flew under a lot of radars. That's a game worth checking out if you've never heard of it. Number 7 is Lies of P, that lying Pinocchio. Number 6 is Hi-Fi Rush, the little indie, well, not an indie game, but little surprise game that could. Number 5 is Pikmin 4, Nintendo finally getting it right. 4th time's a charm. Number 4 is Super Mario Brothers Wonder. Like, this is a really good year for games when a new, fantastic 2D Mario game comes in 4th in our Game of the Year list.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not throwing slight towards any of the other games. And it's also not slight towards this game. This is a fantastic Mario game. It comes in 4th. Number 3 is Sea of Stars. Number 2 is The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. And number 1 is Baldur's Gate 3. Did you have something to add?
I feel like I always bonk the microphone with the earphone, so sorry about that.
I was like, you good?
I didn't know what happened over there. I just saw you suddenly like making hand gestures. I was like, oh, did I do something wrong?
No, that was me.
Okay.
Once an episode, like I said, bonking into the microphone.
We're wearing headphones as well as the like microphones, so it's very easy if you like kind of lean forward and turn your head to like hit the microphone with your headphones. So that's what's going on with Mario over there. Yeah, that's our top 10. I'm happy with that list. I think that's a good list. I think it's a good list that represents this podcast. Again, like if you're listening to this and you are angry, these are the games we played, right? Yeah. Like we can't.
If you're mad that Resident Evil 4 remake isn't on the list, send your email to justin.young@siu.edu.
I will take your emails if you're mad about that. But it's the sort of thing like we can't do anything else with this, right? Like we can only talk about the games that we played and the games we enjoyed. It is a very personalized list. We're not trying to make a definitive list for the entire video game industry. This isn't the Game Awards.
Just because we had the same game of the year.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think a lot of people had this as their game of the year, which says a lot about it and everything. We didn't get the like little indie darling like we did last year for our game of the year.
Yeah.
So
was it Vampire Survivors last year?
Yeah.
Vampire Survivors and then Marvel Snap was 2. Is that right?
No, I don't think it was 2.
I know it
was definitely top 5.
Oh, yeah, okay. I think it made top 5. But wow.
I don't remember what I did yesterday. Why do I remember what I did a year ago?
I don't remember. You can go to salukigames.com and find out what our list from last year was.
True story.
But anyways, yeah, I think this is a good list. We will get this. Obviously, this podcast will be up on the website. We'll actually have a separate post for this list and everything where you can read it. We will also have personal lists. So I will have a personal list up there. Alicia has one. OJ has one. Mario theoretically has one that's
I'm like
still coming.
70% done.
We do have some ones from other contributors as well. So Zoe Freakin also has a list that will go up onto the website. And we have a couple more that people have said are coming in. So we're not exactly sure when these are going up on the website, when they'll get published, but by the time you're listening to this, some of those top 10 lists will be up there and you'll be able to hear those and engage with all that content
or top 27 lists.
Yes. Top 27, top 3. We've got lots of weird numbers. You tell people it doesn't have to necessarily be a top 10. And then people are like, I'm going to play with numbers. So
Look, there's a reason we're communication studies people. We're not numbers people. We don't do math.
Somebody's going to have like their top pi list on there.
Here's my top 3.14 games.
The first third of this game is in my game of the year.
But yeah, so all that will be up on the website and everything. Obviously, this is our sort of goodbye to 2023. It was, as we said, it was a fantastic year in games. Like, this is an amazing list of games. And the games that we left off, right, we're leaving off stuff like Final Fantasy 16, which, lots of people have really enjoyed as well. Trying to look back, Armored Core, Thirsty Suitors.
I feel like Alan Wake 2 will be the one
Right.
that when more of us play it, we'll be like, that probably should have been in the top 10, but what can you do?
Yeah, you can only rank the games that you actually had a chance to play. Alan Wake 2, I know lots of people love that game. That almost certainly would have made our list.
Mm-hmm.
Diablo 4, I know OJ and I both played that and enjoyed it quite a bit. It just, it's more Diablo.
Yeah.
So it just didn't quite rank, but it didn't quite in any other year, Diablo 4 probably makes this list.
Sure.
And I think that's tells you what a great year for games this is. So don't necessarily take any of these as like, oh, this isn't a good game. All these games we've talked about this episode are fantastic games.
Except Final Fantasy Ever Crisis.
Well, yeah.
and probably Mortal Kombat 1 on the Switch.
Yes, do not play the Switch version of Mortal Kombat 1. Anywhere else is probably safe.
Yeah.
Unless they release like a Game Boy version, then
That would be sick. Game Boy Advance game in 2024?
It would look better than the Switch one, probably.
well, the original Mortal Kombat on Game Boy is like notoriously a horrible game. So, but yeah, that does it for our list and everything. Thank you to Mario and Alicia for joining me. Thank you for OJ for providing us their insights. Also via not just the list that they gave us, but also via text messages. We were recording this. OJ was texting Mario with some like feedback and everything on particular games. Thank you for everyone who listens to this. We really appreciate it. We're always looking for your feedback, so you can go to the website and deliver that, or as Alicia pointed out, you can email me at justin.young@siu.edu, and we would love to hear your feedback. And if you disagree on one of these, send that to us. That's okay. We're not going to have our feelings hurt. We'd love to hear your feedback. If there's a game you want to argue should have been in our top 10, send it to us.
Yeah.
And we'd love to talk about that. So that does it for us. We'll be back soon with a regular episode for all the news and games coming out in 2024. But until then, this has been the Saluki Gamescast.